Okay, so now we're going to have two lines. We'll just draw these touching. Okay, they're not actually, let's just to neaten it up, I'll make them perpendicular. Okay, now fillet. Fillet will put a radius curve on a corner. You might not want a sharp edge there, you might want a curved edge. So you can click on fillet and you can click the two lines. And what that's actually done is it's put this curved edge on. Okay, now you can see it's very small because we're zoomed out quite a lot, and it will set to 2mm radius. We also have, if we click this down, we have chamfer. Now chamfer is more, instead of a curved edge, it will be this kind of chamfered edge. If we zoom in. So instead of a curve, it's kind of a cut-off corner, if you will. And when we give it a distance, it's done that 250. We are actually zoomed right out here. So let me zoom back in. And these lines don't have to be touching, by the way. They could be away from each other. And these commands still work, you see. And it puts on our chamfer, it puts on our dimension. Under chamfer we have different options. So the default option is asking one distance. Because it's a 45-degree chamfer, it only needs one distance. But you can do an unequal chamfer, so one side could be 250, the other side could be 100. And you can see that gives us a kind of unequal one. And we can adjust these dimensions and change things as normal. The other is asking for an angle, so 250 at an angle of 45. Let me change that. So maybe that was 30. There we go. So this time it's give us for 250 with an angle of 30. And that's chamfer. Again, play around with chamfer and fillets and get used to those. Now text. Text is, as you guessed, it just brings in a standard text box. This will look familiar to most people, to anyone who uses Word, kind of, or anything really, in this day and age. You've got a normal text window with fonts, sizes, justifications, all that kind of thing. I shouldn't need to explain that to anyone. Hopefully that's just a standard text box. Point, it literally just drops a point. These can be used when it comes to making a part. These can be used to set out where holes will be or other features later on. So you could, for instance, dimension these off there. And you might say these are all going to be holes later on, but for now I just want them marked as points. And later when you go to make holes, you will just tell Inventor, put a hole on every point, and it will. And your sketch will lay out the points. Okay. But we'll look at holes later on. So we've used all these basic shapes and we've used constraints. The other things I want to show you, project geometry, we'll look at that, we'll use that a lot, but we'll look at that when we're actually making things. It's hard to show just as an example like this. Move, it will move some of your sketch geometry. So first you need to select, so let's select this one. Base point, so what do you want to grab it by? So for instance, if you select that, we've grabbed it by that point and we're going to move it. And you might want to move that, it will snap to other geometry, so you might want to move that to be there, and there you go. Okay. Copy works the same way. Select the geometry, base point, but instead of, it's creating a copy, so the original will stay where it is. So you could create lots of copies, for instance, like that. Okay, rotate. You can probably guess this now. Select the base point. In this case, the base point is what you want to rotate around. Now it's come up with this message: the geometry being edited is constrained to other geometry. Basically, it's saying you set this out. Again, those dashed lines were probably up, so we've set this out in relation to something already. It's probably vertically or horizontally aligned to something else when those dashed lines come up. So you can just, would you like these constraints removed? Yes. I don't know what they were, so we'll remove them. And that's interesting. So rotate will rotate around your base point. That funny shape that just came up there, yeah, don't know what that was, ignore it. So, done. Trim. Here's a command you'll use a lot. So we've drawn some lines. Like that. And we've got another line running that way. Now, what we actually want is for these lines to be cut off on this line here. These are too long. They extend past the line. So you can use trim. And our Inventor will guess. So it will trim it back to the nearest object. So in this case, by hovering over it, you can see, in fact you'll see it better on this one, you can see some of it goes dashed. It's showing you how far back it will trim it, and it basically trims it to the next bit of geometry, which happens to be this line. So make sure you click the side you want to get rid of, and you can trim it back to there. Okay. Now, supposing there's a few. Okay. And again, for the drawing lines, I'm just left clicking and then right clicking OK to finish. We might trim it back to there. You see it's trimmed it back to the nearest geometry. Maybe you wanted it back to this one. Just click it again. Okay. Extend works in the opposite sense. It will extend a line to the next geometry. So you just click on the end you want to extend, and you keep going until you hit the geometry you want. Split. Split will allow you, maybe these lines we wanted about 2 lines either side of this one. So by clicking on split, it will split that line into 2. And again, it guesses by looking at the nearest kind of line it thinks you want to split it on. If I move across, it moves to that line and back. So it's guessing. So that's split. Scale. Scale allows you to resize objects. Similar box to move and copy. It's asking to select the geometry. It's asking for a base point, but this time it's going to scale it up. And if I wanted to double the size, then I would type 2 in there. If I wanted it 4 times the size, I would type 4. Okay, 10 times the size, 10. And so on and so on. There you go. Stretch, okay. Stretch. Instead of scaling, you might want something to be say pulled in one direction. So let's select this object here. So let's select these objects here. I'll use that as a base point. Get rid of the constraints, and you can see what we're doing now is we're stretching it. So we didn't select the whole object, we just selected one end of it, and then by dragging we can stretch it and make it longer. Okay. And offset. Offset, well, supposing we wanted a parallel line to the side of it, we can click offset, click on the line, and then we can type in, I want it to 500 offset. Okay. So maybe you want the next line to be 10,000 offset, like that. So it's creating a parallel line offset to the side, and you can it doesn't have to be a line. You can offset a circle, like so. You can offset a rectangle, either inside or outside, and you see all the constraints it gives you automatically.